Joined now by the former executive producer, Hockey Night in Canada, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast. It is John Shannon here with Sekeres and Price. John, how are you?
Hey, boys. Happy Tuesday.
And to you too, and happy opening of the NHL season to you.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of a special day. It always has been. Gosh, this goes back to 1977 for me, that I've been involved somehow, some way, and continue to be involved somehow, some way in the National Hockey League season. So it's always exciting. I'm just glad the preseason's over.
Yes, aren't we all? You've seen a lot. How about this Bedard kid from North Vancouver? He's on the ice tonight against Sidney Crosby. What are your thoughts and hopes for him in his first season in the NHL?
He's pretty good, yeah. He's been put in a tough spot to go to Chicago. Kyle Davidson's done the right thing by surrounding him with some veteran players. It looks like he's going to start the night with Ryan Donato on one side and Taylor Hall on the other. Neither guy was with the Blackhawks last year. But to me, every story you hear about this young guy is that he's 28 going on 18, or 18 going on 28, depending on how you look at it. He's an absolute amazing person, let alone player. Obviously, was brought up properly by his mom and dad. There's a ton of weight on his shoulders when you consider what the Blackhawks were, what they've gone through, and where they're going. And it sounds like he can take every ounce of that weight as a player and as a person.
I mean, I'm intrigued as to what a guy his size can do in his first year, because we think of the elite smaller players, and it's generally been a slower launch. Like Marty St. Louis needed a few years to figure out how to play at the elite level. Even Jack Hughes, as special as he is, remember, pretty muted in his first couple of seasons. Do you think he can hit the ground running? Do you think he's a guaranteed 60-point guy?
Hey, listen, the guy he plays against tonight was pretty small when he started too.
Yeah.
Sidney Crosby is not 6 feet. Sidney Crosby is 5'10" on a good day. Now, Sidney Crosby is as thick as a redwood tree, but that's another story for another.
But so is Connor Bedard. He's a big boy too. Yeah.
Well, I would assume that will come with age as well, that he will become a thicker player. The great thing about hockey, Blake, now is that it's not just a big man sport, particularly the regular season. So I think he will manage well. I think his speed will keep him in good stead, and his shot will keep everybody at bay. So the answer to your question is yes. One thing I will tell you, I was there the first night that Connor McDavid played Sidney Crosby. Sid took no prisoners. Sid was out to win. And I suspect tonight we will get a good measure of Sidney Crosby's killer instinct, and it will help Connor Bedard in the long run.
Yeah, welcome to the NHL, kid.
Exactly.
We were friends until tonight when the puck dropped.
And no apologies for it. No.
Yeah.
No.
The Canucks don't have Pettersson signed. And yesterday, Elliot Friedman saying, look, if he's unsure, I think the Canucks may have had a look at it and say they're unsure as well. Can you find a good reason, John, why the Vancouver Canucks would be unsure about extending Elias Pettersson? And what do you make of that comment? Do you think there's some frustration on the Canucks end of things at this point?
I don't think there's frustration more than it's just a feeling out process in a negotiation. And I mean, that's what it is. This is a negotiation. There are still lots of question marks about where the cap is going to go, not necessarily for next summer, but for years to come. And I think that changes a lot of what players ask for and what teams expect. So I as much as I understand and respect Elliot and what he says and how he says it all the time, and probably got it from somebody credible, I just put this as, here we go. I mean, dare I remind everybody that we all had Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele out of Winnipeg for the whole summer.
Yeah.
And boom. So from that perspective, this is negotiation, and that's exactly what they're doing, and that's what Elias is doing, and that's what the team is doing.
Do you get the feeling that the Vancouver Canucks have another trade up their sleeves, though, somehow, some way? Do they see that gaping hole on the right side of their defense and feel the need to address that? They just got Sam Lafferty as some depth, but I was really expecting them to maybe pull a rabbit out of their hat and make another defenseman trade. Do you think that's still coming here in the next 4 to 8 weeks?
I think anything's possible now. I think that once teams get into the meat of the schedule and 8 to 10 games in, there people are going to say, okay, we thought we were better at this position than we are, or we're not as good as we are. By the way, I love the Lafferty deal. I think Sam Lafferty, I mean, he's another one of those guys like Teddy Bluger. By Christmas time, there'll be tons of Lafferty sweaters at Rogers Arena too, because he's fun to watch. He's got great speed. He's not afraid to mix it up. I think Lafferty will be a real hit with the fans in Vancouver this season.
The roster manipulations are in effect. Do you? Is there a better way of doing this? I mean, I'm sure this is very confusing for the fans watching the comings and goings of the roster. It's gymnastics for a lot of teams, and the Canucks are one of those teams doing them.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is the soft underbelly of a salary cap system, where if you move players up and down, your timing becomes an issue. And really, what this points to, Blake, in many ways, is the wise move to move the farm club to Abbotsford. So that actual moves aren't really putting guys on planes and back and forth. Now, I'm not saying that happened every time for a lot of teams that have thousands of miles between their farm clubs, but I think that it's one of those things that we're not going to see that fixed until the summer of 2026, when the new CBA, and I can't believe I'm saying this, new CBA gets put into place. And I hope by 2026 I'm not going to have to worry about.
And I've asked you this before, but you still, I believe your answer was you don't believe they'll ever go soft cap, never get a franchise player tag. None of that stuff will ever happen here.
No. In fact, I talked to people on both sides, and on the agent side and on the league side, and I think it's going to get tougher. I think that in the long run, we might see 5-year contract maxes, and we're going to see a higher percentage for the owners rather than the players. I really do. I think that's where we're going. I think that when you negotiate with Mr. Bettman, it's a gradual clawing back of certain situations.
That sounds like a work stoppage to me when you say that.
Yeah, no, it does to me, because I would sit there and look around.
You must work for a team, because you call it work stoppage as opposed to a lockout.
Well, I'll go so far and say if that's the case, I could see a strike. Because
right.
I mean,
the problem is that the timing of a strike, yeah, I can't believe we're even talking about this. This gives me the willies. I've been through. Yeah. I mean, I lived through the only strike the players did in '92, and I lived through every lockout that I lost count of. So I try not to contemplate the next one.
Yeah, and of course, in this league with this commissioner, don't ever underestimate greed and billionaires' greed as being a driving force of what the league does and how it's governed. So let's move that aside. McKaev's not going to be ready. Did the Canucks screw this up last year, letting him play as long as they did?
That's interesting. You guys saw Dan Milstein's tweet yesterday.
Yeah, we did. He said he wanted to clear things up. The only thing he cleared up, although I'm not sure we needed clarity on this, was that players heal at different, on different schedules. They had hoped it would be 8 months, and it looks like it's going to be longer than quite 8 months to the day. So
yeah, I don't know Dan very well. I've met him a couple of times. He was very pleasant. I just wonder why that tweet now. Was he asked to put it out? What was the reason for it?
It sounds like it sounds like he's asked.
Well, it certainly does. It does to me that hey, you better. We've been carrying water on this one. You better help us out. or now, Dan, because, and let's face it, Patrick and Jim have a tremendously positive relationship with Dan and all his clients that play for the Canucks. So from that perspective, this is one where I think Dan tried to take a little bit of heat off the club.
All right, John, prediction time. Where do you see these Vancouver Canucks finishing in 23-24?
Well, I've said this before. I'll say it again. If Thatcher Demko can play like Thatcher Demko can play, then I think they will be in that 3-4 race in the Pacific Division and could vie for a playoff spot. The defensive responsibilities Rick Tocchet's put in place makes this team much better. Scoring goals is not going to be a problem for this hockey club. Obviously, keeping them out of the net is going to be a priority. If they can do that, then they can scare a few people. And I suspect that when you look at where the Oilers are, Vegas are, Los Angeles is, then put Vancouver right in that wheelhouse right there and say, hey, listen, number 4 in the Pacific, does that get them to a playoff spot?
Yeah, I think it probably will, unless you have an outsized view of the Central this year.
No, I don't. I don't really. I think that the Central's in a rebuild mode. Lots of teams.
Yeah, and for me, John, one of the things that's going to be interesting last year, in difference from last year, is last year we had some truly dreadful teams in the Western Conference. When you take a look at just how bad Chicago was, just how bad, and frankly, I thought Arizona almost overachieved last year to get to 70 points, but how bad Arizona was, and then San Jose and Anaheim at 58 and 60 respectively. To me, one of the big questions is, will those 4 be able to steal more points off the Western Conference teams above them than they did last year? Because everybody in the playoffs last year was 95 points or better. In fact, only Winnipeg was below 100 points in the West. So can those 4 bottom feeders accrue a few more points than they did last year, which may drop the playoff bar down a little bit for the Vancouver Canucks to make it, particularly if they take care of their business against the San Jose's and the Anaheims and Chicagos of the world?
I mean, I think those 3 of those teams aren't going to be better. Chicago, Anaheim, and San Jose are not going to be better. I think Arizona could scare a lot of people. I think Arizona, what Billy Armstrong's done there, their young guys are good. Logan Cooley is a really good hockey player. Gunter's a really good hockey player. They have a good young nucleus, and I think guys, in the end, that little barn they play in is going to be tremendous home ice advantage for them. Their home record is going to be spectacular this year. I think they're going to scare a lot of people in the Central. So of those 4 teams, I think Arizona could be closer to the real deal than anybody else. But I think in the end, is Vancouver better than Calgary? I think they are. Calgary's got a tough situation going. Ryan Huska's got a tough situation going there. And we'll have to see what happens with the Flames. But from that perspective, I put the Canucks in 4th.
Where are you on Nashville and Winnipeg?
Wow. You talk to anybody in Nashville, they did not have a good training camp just because of all the changes. And, Andrew Burnett getting his first gig as a head coach, real head coach with the Predators. So for me, that's a learning curve there that's going to take till Christmas. But they do have UC Saros, and so he's going to be a difference maker. Winnipeg's the interesting one for me because on paper, they look so much better. They've always, the Jets have always looked great on paper. They always look good. They've always had good names, big names on paper. Josh Morrissey has to keep playing at that level that he did for the first 60 games of the season. Nick Ehlers has to get healthy. Connor Hellebuyck. Now that Connor Hellebuyck's settled and he's got his best friend is his goalie partner in Laurent Brossoit. They could scare people if they get off to the same start they did last year, which was really good until Christmas. And they learn how to sustain that, then they could be a lot higher in the standings in the Central than people expect.
Yeah, and you wonder because last year Rick Bowness didn't seem to love his roster, and I'm not sure the roster loved Rick Bowness, and so to bring back
I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that was a problem, honestly. I think that what they were trying to do was, and I know it's a cliche, is they were trying to change that culture. They were trying to make sure that that other voices in the room were heard, that Ehlers was heard, that Kyle Connor was heard, that Morrissey was heard, and to me, the question will become, with this new contract, is Mark Scheifele going to be a good teammate? That to me is the biggest question. Has he learned the lessons of culture too? And will he keep his shifts short? And will he not try to just run the power play from halfway up the board and sit there and pretend to shoot and be Alex Ovechkin? That's the key thing for Winnipeg. If Scheifele's bought into the new world, then this team can be pretty good.
Great stuff, John. Thank you for this. Look forward to next Tuesday already.
Let's drop the puck, boys. I'm getting going here. Come on.
This great clip brought to you by, wait for it, Great Clips. It's going to be great.